This is EUC4630, Managing Users. This is going to be a deep dive into VMware's User Environment Manager. A couple quick introductions. My name is Michael Bradley. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with VMware's Professional Services Engineering team. And my colleague...
Yep, my name is Dale Carter. I'm also a Senior Solutions Architect. I'm working with Mike.
Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with the... If you guys have been at any sessions already this week, you guys have seen this slide repeatedly. This is our typical legal slide. I'm not going to read it verbatim because at this point you guys should probably know it by heart. So we're going to go through a quick agenda here. We got 4 parts of the presentation we're going to do. I'm going to cover sections 1 through 4, and then we're going to do a quick demo for you of some of the things you can do with User Environment Manager. Dale's going to take care of that piece of it. So I just do want to warn you that originally we were going to build out this nice little lab environment and do this whole live demo for you, but anybody that's ever been to VMworld knows that live demos are like, you know, throwing dice. So we do, it is video, it's a video, but we're going to walk through everything and talk through the video for you so you guys can see a live demo of how, or a demo of how everything works with User Environment Manager. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with talking about an overview. For those of you that are still coming in, there's plenty of seats down front. I don't bite, but Dale does. So come on down and, you know, make yourself comfortable. So let's start with talking about User Environment Manager for a few minutes. So the big first question that comes out for any user manager person, anybody that's an administrator or desktop administrator, is how do I manage my users? How do I manage their environment? How do I manage their settings? And there's 3 groups of people that usually come into this kind of discussion. And the first one is the IT people, the IT team. You know, they're looking for a way to manage user profiles that's very simple, that they don't have to do a lot of work with. I mean, let's face it, desktop administrators have plenty to do without having to worry about user profiles as well. So there's always this discussion about, you know, I want something that's really simple, something really easy to use, something that's very easy for me to apply policies to, that's not going to take me 2 or 3 days to configure and set up and get things working. And they also want something that's not going to allow the user to go out of compliance from whatever configuration, whatever settings you have in your corporate environment. Then you have the people, then you have the business owners. The business owners are more concerned about scaling. They're more concerned about scaling across multiple environments, or scaling as the company grows. No business owner ever wants to have to buy a solution and then as the company grows, go out and buy another solution. They want one that's going to be able to grow with the company. They also want one that's going to lower the management costs. They don't want to have to bring consultants in every time they have to make a major change to the user profile environment. And then they also want something that's going to adapt to their needs, not vice versa. They don't want a piece of software or solution that they're going to be forced to change the way they do business to work with. They want one that's going to change for them, and that's going to adapt to what they need. And then finally, we have the end users. Now, everybody knows end users can be picky. Everybody knows end users want everything in the world, including the picture of their little puppies up on the background so they can see it, or their grandkids so they can see it every day. But the big thing the end users want is consistency. End users don't like change. Everybody knows that. When you change the way their desktop looks or the way an application works, right away they start to complain, they start to get upset. So they want something that's going to be consistent all the time. They also want fast access to their applications and the things that they need to do work. They want to be able to get in there quick because they know the longer that takes them to get started, the longer they're going to be at work and the longer they're going to have to do stuff. So they want fast access, and they don't want downtime. So User Environment Manager covers 3 particular areas of the user profile. The first thing is the user profile itself, the user settings, the user profile. Then there's user personalization. I've changed my desktop wallpaper, I've changed my screensaver, my keyboard settings. And then there is also contextual policies. It gives you the ability to manage these 3 particular areas of a desktop environment. And the biggest beauty about User Environment Manager, and this may, for those of you that have been with VMware for a long time, you know that we are a virtualization company. The The beauty about User Environment Manager is that it works across all those platforms. It works across virtual environments. It works on your physical desktops as well. It'll even work in the cloud. So you no longer have to have, you wouldn't have to have a profile management system for virtual desktops and one for physical. You literally can use User Environment Manager for every desktop in the architecture and in your environment. So let's talk about the benefits for just a second. First thing the User Environment Manager does, it makes things very easy. Management on a day-to-day basis is very simple. Configuration of it is extremely simple to use, and you'll see that when we get into the architecture in a minute. It also helps to accelerate your management capabilities, your migrations, your onboarding. How many people here have gone through a Windows XP to Windows 7 migration? And because the profiles don't work across both of them, everybody's been talking about how they have struggles with that. The beauty about User Environment Manager is that it works, the same profile information that comes out of User Environment Manager crosses all the platforms. So you can go from Windows XP to Windows 7 to Windows 8 to Windows 10 back to Windows XP. You don't have to do any migration or anything like that. User Environment Manager works across, all the platforms. And it's the same with applications as well. If you're going from Office 2013 to Office 2016, I think is the next version coming out, all the settings that you have for that, User Environment Manager will capture and automatically be able to work on the newer version, so the migration works across the application platforms as well. And then there's the consistency. It's a consistent experience for the users. It's going to give them their desktop. It's going to give them their modifications, their customizations, whatever they do, and it's going to do it for them, and it's going to help with their productivity. And then, of course, finally, you get faster access, primarily because User Environment Manager will speed up that login time and get them into their environment much faster. I'm going to show you how that all works in a few minutes when we get into the architecture itself. So we'll talk about features for a few minutes. So in a desktop architecture, this is usually what you're kind of looking at. You have an operating system in there. You've got your applications. You've got user data and user files. And then somewhere in this picture, you've got all these settings as well that you have to think about. So all of this stuff works together to give your user a single desktop. So User Environment Manager comes in and starts by grabbing user environment settings. It grabs the application configuration. So for each application on the desktop, it's actually grabbing those configurations, window size, default fonts, things like that. Personalization, everything that the user does, changes their background, changes their screensaver, captures that as well. And then it also allows you to do some dynamic configuration. And we're going to talk about each of these areas in detail next here. But the dynamic configuration is probably one of the most versatile pieces of it, because it allows you to set policies and give you control of the user's desktop based on things like IP address, where they're connecting to, where they're connecting from, things like organizational units, OUs that they're a part of as well. So we'll start with user environment settings. This is your very basic stuff. Mapping network drives, mapping your printers, shortcuts for the applications, setting up the references for applications, whether this particular file association, that's the word I'm looking for. Setting up file associations, registry settings, all of that can be managed by User Environment Manager for you. And you can target these settings. So here's this conditions. This is the thing I just talked about a second ago. You can actually set this up where if the user's logging in, let's say, for instance, they have when they're in the office, they get an E drive mapped to their desktop. You can actually set User Environment Manager up to say, well, if you are in this subnet, they get that E drive, but if they connect to the desktop from another subnet, which may be unsecured or coming in through VPN, they don't get that mapping. Or they don't get that printer mapping, or they don't get access to a certain set of applications, things like that. You can actually use User Environment Manager to create those types of condition-based policies. And the way that User Environment Manager works, everything's applied on log on, and everything's reverted on log off. So this is where you get to see things like link clones become much more usable from a persistent desktop standpoint, because a user can get a blank desktop, one that's not generic, or one that's very generic. All their settings are applied when they log in, and all those settings disappear, captured, and go away when they log off. So they get a customized linked clone desktop, which is something that for a while, really link clones were kind of, you couldn't really use those for persistent desktops because of the fact that everything gets wiped out. If you're using User Environment Manager, you actually can, because all those settings can be applied. They get that fully customizable desktop. And when they log in the next time and get a different link clone desktop, they're going to see the same thing they saw when they logged off the last time that they came in. Application configuration. So User Environment Manager also can control the application configurations. And this works with virtual applications as well as natively installed applications. So what do I mean by application configurations? Stuff like my window size, my default fonts, what menu bars are available. I can go in and set all of those as a default for the user and say, this is what your application is going to look like when you launch it. Or you could set that default and say, this is what it's going to look like, but if you change it, I'm going to capture all those settings so the next time you log in, you get those settings back. So if a user goes in and changes their window size, the size of an application, they're going to get that next time they log in, because User Environment Manager will capture that. You can also customize your configurations, things like mapping network drives and mapping printers when you launch an application. So for instance, if you want your user to only ever be able to print to a certain printer when they're using Microsoft Word, you can use User Environment Manager to set a policy that says, when the user launches Microsoft Word, map this printer to their desktop, and when they shut down Microsoft Word, unmap it. You can do the same thing with drives. You can have it run a series of custom tasks if necessary, set certain registry settings as well, all based on whether when the application is launched and when the application shuts down. You can set up your predefined settings and apply them, so you can have them as initial defaults. So when the user logs in for the first time, here's what their window is going to look like, and then they can customize it and do whatever they want. You could set it up as what we call partially enforced, where if they log in and they don't have a already existing user-created customization, it'll look the same way as the defaults, but if they make changes, we'll allow those changes to be saved, or you can force those on the user every time. So even if they try to make changes, next time they log in, those settings will be reverted back to the way they were. And then also, as mentioned earlier about migrations, this works across multiple versions of an application. So you can go from Adobe 6 to Adobe 7, Adobe 7 to Adobe 8, or Adobe 6 to 8. Those settings will migrate across those applications seamlessly. You don't have to reconfigure things. You don't have to change stuff around. User Environment Manager will work completely across those versions as well. And then there's personalization. Now, this is the piece that usually impacts the users most with User Environment Manager. This is the user stuff. This is the stuff that the user will go in and make changes to. We can capture all that. It completely decouples the user profile and the personalization from the desktop, completely separates it. So that if they go from a physical desktop to a virtual desktop, those settings will follow them wherever they go. If they go from one virtual desktop to another, they go from Windows XP to Windows 8, those settings and those customizations will follow them as you go along. Managing your Windows settings at logon, keyboard, mouse, wallpapers, screensavers, all that stuff gets captured. Application personalizations. We talked a second ago about how the user can actually make changes and modifications to what they see on the screen, changing the menu bars, changing all of that on an application, and that stuff will actually get captured and maintained and loaded at application launch the next time the user actually launches the application. And all that stuff is run dynamically across all the different versions, and they roam across Windows versions as well. Windows XP, Windows 7, 64-bit, 32-bit, and so forth. And then this is the dynamic configuration. I briefly talked about condition-based configurations. If you're in a highly secured type of environment and you need to be concerned about what a user has access to on what IP subnet, you can actually use User Environment Manager to configure some of that. You can set it up where if I'm on this subnet, I can't get these applications, I can't get access to this data, I can't get access to this hard drive, I can't get access to these printers. If I'm on another subnet, I can get access to all that stuff. You can actually do all of those configurations based on IP address, their group membership, what operating system they're logging into, what Active Directory OUs they're a part of. You have a lot of options that you can set up as condition-based configurations. And you can have these policies triggered automatically in an active session. So let's say you've got a user that's been logged on for 4 hours and you need to make a major change to their customization. You need to change their condition-based configuration. You can actually have triggers that will automatically refresh that policy for the user, or you can just call them up and say, hey, I need you to click on this icon to refresh something. So you have that ability to set this up so that it automatically occurs. You can run tasks, custom tasks. They all can be run in an active session. You can configure stuff so that it happens at log off, at log on, when they lock or unlock the workstation, when they disconnect. So you have a lot of flexibility as to when these policies get pushed down, when they get controlled, and when they occur. So all this sounds probably pretty great. And anybody that's worked with our products knows you've got servers you have to worry about. You've got all kinds of different configurations and different components that are in the architecture. Well, I'm going to talk to you about the architecture and give you some overview of what there is. This is a User Environment Manager components. This is everything that you need to deploy User Environment Manager. We start with the User Environment Manager Management Console. This is where you're going to do all your configurations. This is where you're going to create your policies, create your settings, your condition-based triggers, all of that stuff. This gets installed on just about any desktop that you want. It can be installed on your desktop. It can be installed on several. As long as it has access to the rest of the architecture that's required, you can install this anywhere. The User Environment Manager client, obviously, that goes on the desktops. That runs all the policies, applies everything. There's 2 services that get installed with it, the Flex service as well as the Flex engine. You've got the User Environment Manager Application Profiler. This is where you're going to actually create those profiles that you use with the applications to make your settings, your configurations. You have the User Environment Manager Sync tool. This is for laptop users who are going to be offline a lot. This will actually sync their configurations, their settings back and forth into your architecture when they connect again. There's the Help Desk component, which gives your Help Desk the opportunity to go and look at support log files, do support for the users. And then finally, we also have an optional component that you can give to your users themselves, which is the User Environment Manager SelfSupport. And that actually gives the user the ability to self-help themselves in the event that they make a change to a configuration somewhere, they change a window. This is something we're going to show you in the demo, where they actually may change a window, shrink it down too small, they can't open it back up. They can actually restore those settings back to an earlier version and get themselves back to where they can actually continue to work. So looking at all this, I'm sure you guys are thinking, oh, this is going to have like 6 or 7 servers. It's going to have, a farm type of environment. I'm going to need extra ESX hosts, whatever. There's your User Environment Manager architecture. So the first thing I want to point out to you, there's no servers. There is no server component to this. You don't have to connect a broker type server, a connection type server. There's 3 main components that you need for User Environment Manager. You need the Active Directory, because the User Environment Manager is enabled through group policy, and you need 2 file shares. Well, when I say 2 file shares, you have 2 file shares if you have 1 user. You have to have a central config share where all of your configurations are stored, your base level configurations, and then you need a user share for each user, and that's it. There's no database required, so there's no SQL Server required, there's no replication to be worried about. When you look up here at the management console and the application profiler, those are installed on whatever you want. The application profiler will go on a reference system, a reference desktop that you'll use for profiling your applications. And the management console can be installed on your help desk user desk. It can be installed on your desk. Or it can be installed on several users' desks. As long as they have access to those file shares, that's it. That's the entire architecture for User Environment Manager. It's pretty simple. There's not a lot involved. All these settings and all the configurations that we talked about are all stored in basically a set of small INI files that are stored in these shares, which allows us to be able to pull them down at log on and at log off and at application launch and application shutdown very quickly and very fast. And it creates what we call a just-in-time desktop configuration, which I'll show you about how that all works. But the INI files are very small, and they capture all those different settings, and they're pulled down when you log on and log off and application launch and so forth. So just real quick, these are the three you need. The Active Directory, obviously, you need to have that. You need to have the central config. This can be on any type of file server. It can be a Windows file server. This can be an SMB share on a SAN or a NAS of some kind. And the same with the user share. And this is where their profile archive goes. This is where all their customizations go. That can, again, be on a file server, SMB, whatever, however you want to work that out. The other piece of it, now this is optional, but I would highly recommend that you use it. So the one thing that User Environment Manager doesn't do is it doesn't actually capture user files. So like Word documents, things that are in my documents, my pictures, my music, things like that are not captured by User Environment Manager. It's focused on getting the settings and the configurations. So you'd probably, your best practice would be to enable folder redirection for those folders so that they're pushed out as well to a network file share where they're stored. And here's a look at what the permissions are. The central config share really is just a read permissions on the file share itself. If you're doing an active data center configuration or you need to have that high availability capability, we support DFS namespaces. So you can have that configured and replicate the shares as long as the naming structure and the path names are the same. You can replicate that through whatever mechanism you have in place, whether it's across multiple data centers or whether you just want to replicate it from one SAN to another or one NAS for another just for backup purposes. You can do all that, and we completely support that. And then, of course, the user share is really no different than you would have for redirected folders. Permissions are all set at the user level and the administrator level. And those are all created as well. As you create that group policy to enable it, you're going to plug in that path name, and this is all going to be created for you. So what User Environment Manager does, it gives you the ability to do this just-in-time configuration. So what do I mean by this? So, we talked about how you get things on login, you get things on log off, you get application launch, and so forth. User Environment Manager will speed up the logon process for your users onto their desktops because the only thing we're going to send down to the desktop and log on and apply is, whoa. Ooh. Okay. Wow. Whew. Yeah. Yeah, wow. Yes. It's just to make sure you guys were all not falling asleep back there. So what we do with the User Environment Manager is when we log on, when the user logs on, we only pull down the INI files and the configurations that are needed to get the Windows settings applied. So we don't pull down any of the application settings or anything like that, just what we need to get the user logged in and on their desktop and working. And that's where we're able to speed up the actual login process for the user, because if you're using like roaming profiles, the entire profile has to come down to the desktop before you even get the user logged on and working. And that's what we're trying to avoid by using User Environment Manager, by shortening that time frame. So this is a just-in-time configuration. I'm going to walk you through an example of what happens. So on the top, we've got our user session. Now, obviously, there's nobody in there yet. There's nobody doing anything on the desktop. The user session is nobody connected, so that's completely idle. And down at the bottom, we've got our profile data stores. And these will be the two file stores that we talked about earlier, the central file config share and also the user file share. So in our profile data store, we have a base profile, and this may be centralized configurations. This may also be a profile that the user has created previously. And they've got a desktop sitting up there in the user session waiting. So the user connects to the desktop, they log on. Now this could be, like I said earlier, this could be a virtual desktop. This could also be physical. So this could be them sitting down at their physical desktop, they turn the monitor on and type in their password. So the first thing we're going to do is just import the user settings. Screensaver, background settings, keyboard settings, that stuff. Just enough to get that user logged in. The user gets their desktop and now they start working. So the first thing I do as a user, I'm going to launch I use Adobe all day for some reason. I don't know why. The user will launch Adobe. So unlike what we did at the user logon, we didn't pull anything down for Adobe. So we didn't, right now, as far as our desktop is concerned, Adobe is running with its default settings, the default settings that it gets at installation. So we launch that application. User Environment Manager goes out and says, hey, I've got a configuration for Adobe that's supposed to be a specific window, it's supposed to be specific default fonts, it's supposed to be specific information, things in there. I'm going to pull all that down. So we actually pull those INI files down, implant them, import them into the user session when they launch that application. Now, part of that may be, I'm mapping a particular drive for the user as well, and maybe mapping a printer. So we're going to do all of that when that user launches that application. So let's say I'm the user, and I'm going through my day, and I'm working on Adobe, and I make some changes. I change, the way the screen is displayed. I get rid of all my menus because I don't like any menus. I take all of that out. I go through my day working. At the end of the day, I shut down Adobe. User Environment Manager goes out and goes, hey, you as a user have made some changes. I need to capture those changes for that application. And we'll pull them down. Now, I may still be connected to this desktop, continuing to work with another application or something like that. But when I shut down Adobe, we're going to grab all the settings that have changed and pull them down and save them in the user shares. And then at the end of the day, I go to log off. We grab any Windows settings, and we pull them down and export them to the user shares. The beauty of this is now that those have all been exported, when I go back and start this process all over again, any settings that I did from the last session that I'm on will show up in here. And that's a just-in-time desktop. The ability to just-in-time provide features, configurations, capabilities to your end users based on application launch, based on IP address, based on organizational unit, based on operating system. It gives you that ability to do all of that just in time for the user to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through a quick demo for you. Dale's going to walk through that, and then we're going to give we have about 10 minutes. We'll have about 10 minutes to take questions at the end. So I'm going to hand this over to Dale to get started as soon as I get the video going here. All right. Oh, hold on. Got to get the stop the slideshow. There we go.
All right, so like Michael said, this is really configured through GPO. As we see here in this environment, I've basically configured about 6 GPOs, so we can access this. We are configuring things like the 2 shares that we talked about. We're configuring login to see if we want to configure what log files we're going to create or capture. Just going to let this catch up. So there we're telling it where the central UEM share is for the configuration files. We'll tell you where the user ones are. Tell you where to save the login files, where to save the archives. If we're going to back up the archives, we've got it configured to back up a certain amount of archives. You can set that for each user. So if they want to go and restore settings. Then there's the file shares themselves. Again, just showing you here the differences. Again, no database at all. We have, for this environment, I've got 3 file shares because I'm actually going to map a drive. But here's the central configuration file shares. It's all just folders and INI files, as Michael was saying earlier. So there you can see it's just a bunch of ini files and a bunch of icon files. Right? So, and if you open up any of these files, it's just a basic text file which is telling us each of the settings. So you can either go through and edit them there, or you can edit it through the management console themselves. So then here I've got a user data drive so that I can map some drives later on in the demo. It's just a basic share that I just quickly created. And then the users have their own share where they save their archived files for each of their applications and each of their settings. And again, the key thing to take away from this is there's just no database at all required. This is just file shares and text files. Right, so now we're going to demo some of the changes that we can make. Notice here we're going from a Windows 7 to a Windows 10 desktop. We've opened up Notepad on the Windows 10 desktop. You can see the file size there, or the screen, the window size. If we go across to the Windows 7, it's the same size there. We'll make some changes. We'll turn word wrap off. We'll
Wow.
I like it. So as you can see, we changed the window size. We'll go back across to the Windows 10 desktop. You can see those settings instantly followed us. Right, so we'll go and make some changes on the Windows 10 side. We'll change the font. So basically, when we close this application, it's writing those changes to those INI files. So that when you log on again on the other side, and notice we haven't logged out of each of the desktops. So just by changing those, just by closing the application, it saved those settings. As you can see there, the settings have followed us across to the next desktop. I'm just going to make the same changes on the Windows 7 side, so that then you can see that going back to Windows 10, the same changes follow us across. So there we have a new font across on the Windows 10 desktop. So we're going to quickly show you how to create drive mappings here. And like Michael said, this could be a printer. We can create a number of settings per application. It's not per user, so it's definitely per application. You can also notice there, if you can see on the screen, that you can choose the drive letter, or you can choose the next available. You can actually also choose different credentials. So you may want the user to connect to this drive with a different credential from this application. And we'll also choose it to disconnect the drive when the application closes. So we'll just save that setting, which will make the change to the INI file. We'll go back to our Windows 7 desktop. Notice there's no drive map there. We'll open up Notepad, and in the background you see the drive got mapped instantly. As we close Notepad, you'll see that drive gets disconnected. Right, the same thing again on Windows 10. We'll open up Notepad and we'll go and look to see if that drive's there. Right, you can see down at the bottom it's mapped that user data drive, and as we close the application, the drive is disconnected. So now we'll look at some of the conditions. For this condition, we're going to map a drive. Okay. So we're going to map a drive. Have I gone?
Yep.
Completely gone.
One. Yep. Is yours work?
No.
No, you're done.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Yeah. So with the condition, what we're going to do is we're going to say we'll map this drive, but only if you've got a certain IP address. So this could, for this demonstration, we're actually going to do this on the IP of the virtual desktop. However, this could be the IP address of the physical desktop you're coming from. So, and again, this could be a subnet. It could be a full subnet, a single IP address, a range of IP addresses. So we've got a lot of control over what we can do here. So just make that change, save the file. Now we'll go back to our Windows 7 desktop, which has the IP address that we just give it. So as we open the calculator there, you can see the drive was mapped. If we go to the Windows 10 desktop, which has a different IP address, now when we launch the calculator, that drive is just not mapped at all. So imagine this when you're coming in from home, your users, if they're in the office, they want to launch and connect to a mapped drive where there's some secure data. They can from the office desktop. When they're coming in from home, you don't want them getting access to that private data. Maybe it's a little bit secure, so you can stop the users from doing that. Here we'll look at the self-help tool that Mike talked about. So we've got our user. They're going to open up Notepad. They're going to make some changes. For this demo, we're just going to change the window size. This could be changing the language of the application. They may change the menu settings, and they just don't know how to get that back. So quickly and easily, they can open up the SelfSupport tool. They can find that application. They can either reset to the standard, or they can just restore from an earlier version. Click OK, open up the application, and there you go. We're back to how the user wants it. So they're just a couple of quick things you can do with User Environment Manager. It's a very powerful tool with a very easy configuration. I think we've got some slides.
Yeah, we got a couple slides. So we just got a couple slides here with a couple. We have a couple slides. One slide that has some references or resources for you. I'm going to just bring this back up.
So what we did, we actually wrote a white paper on how to set up a User Environment Manager in 60 minutes or less. I actually wrote this and I deployed 50 desktops, the whole configuration, had everything up and running. I actually got it up and running in about 53 minutes. So the white paper's out there. You can go download it, test it out in your environments, and see how quickly you can do it as well.
And we've got also, obviously, we've got the product documentation, and Dale is a big blogger, so he's got a couple blogs out there as well that you can take a look at with information about User Environment Manager. So we've got actually quite a bit of time. So we're going to go ahead and take questions. Would like, I think, are we recording this? I think so. We want everybody to step up to the mic. Is that correct? Okay. So if you've got a question, if you can form a line at one of the microphones, and then we'll take your questions.
All right, I got a question. When you're dealing with a boot storm in the morning, would it be better to have these on faster drives, those stores?
So there's not really much getting pulled down for a boot storm because they really are just tiny little INI files. I mean, speed is always going to help, so you certainly could. We certainly support them going on faster drives, but I don't think it'd make much of a difference because it's not the desktop. I mean, I would put the desktops on the faster drives, but User Environment Manager is fine.
Okay.
Over here?
Yeah. How does the IP condition work for a VDI user? Because the VDI user will have the same IP address from a VDI perspective, but he might log in from different thin clients which will have a different subnet. So do you look at thin client IP address or a VDI IP address?
So you can do both. You can do from the VDI IP address, which is right. It probably won't make any difference because it's going to be on your corporate network, but we can actually look with some changes in the new version. You can actually look at the physical IP address where it's coming in from,
okay, thanks.
which helps a great deal.
We'll come over here.
If we're using something like app volumes for on the application side, I think that app volumes has some kind of application where the settings will actually, stay with the application.
So the writable volume.
What's that?
The app volume's writable volume.
Yeah, exactly. So does one override the other now if we're combining app volumes with UEM, because they both seem to, on the application side at least, store that application settings. So which one?
So yeah, so UEM would still store it as well, and after 2.9 of app volumes, as we announced a couple of weeks ago, we won't be saving them settings into the writable volume anymore. So it will be UEM for that.
Okay, thanks.
Over here.
Would you say it's a complete replacement for persona management? And when would you still need some kind of persona manager?
So they can work side by side, and right now we will support both. And long term, this probably will be used more than Persona Manager, although Persona Manager could still be used to manage the data, right, if you don't want to use other technologies.
Okay, well, what I'm trying to get at is certain applications still stores data in the persona or
Sorry?
user profile. Certain applications may store data in the profile. So how do you address that?
So UEM will capture that data too.
Okay,
Anything in the application settings, UEM will capture and put it into the user share,
okay.
just like Persona Manager.
Do you have to run the application profiler for every application to do like map drives? And if so, are there any compatibility issues that you've seen so far with applications through that?
So no compatibility issues. You don't have to do it, right? We're finding most companies do it start off with about 10%, right, of the critical applications. But you certainly can do it for all of them. You can also just write the text files as well, if that's easier, and you can just download like templates as well and things like that. There's a lot of people
you
sharing.
could map for Notepad like that without having to do a profile on
Yeah,
it first?
so User Environment Manager comes with a number of standard templates as well for different applications like Office and some of the Windows stuff. Everything I did today was basic install of User Environment Manager.
Over here.
This kind of add on to a question from a minute ago. When you're using conditions like an IP address, can you read environment variables out of the Windows environment?
Yes.
You can, so you could read like the view client IP address that gets inserted by the client.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Oh, I must have answered somebody's question.
Had the same question.
So I think I'm missing something here on the product. From my perspective, it looks like this only works with systems which are basically behind or inside your own network. So in a case where you actually have mobile users who actually never really connect back to the home office, but you do want to capture that information because they're road warriors, and they are very clumsy / careless with their equipment, obviously the time to rebuild that system actually does require resources on behalf of the department and such. So I'm curious to see whether or not this product actually can be used inside that environment.
Sure. So we actually have a sync tool as well that can be installed on those desktops that aren't on the network. It will capture everything, and then it will sync with the configuration shares the next time it's on the network. So like an offline mode type of thing. Does that help?
It is. I don't recall that being mentioned as part
Yeah,
of
it was on the list of components. It's mentioned.
Walked in late then.
Yeah, it's a sync tool that just does the laptop users offline stuff.
It can either be laptop users, it could be a remote office where you've got poor connectivity, you don't want users connecting all the time, so you can actually install a sync tool. So you've got 10 desktops in a remote office, rather than setting up something else, you could use that.
Okay.
And it would keep all the settings locally.
I have one follow-up question to that too. So along those lines, I mean, if you're able to actually utilize this tool for remote users and such, if we were to have, say, a Horizon View environment, I mean, could those two systems actually potentially be synced in tandem?
So yeah, so the sync tool would talk back every time it came on the network. So if a user was on his laptop and he had the sync tool there and wanted to connect into a view environment, it would have to be on the network.
But there's a VPN requirement on this then.
Okay, sorry. So it wouldn't be synced if you can't connect back to your network.
Okay.
Okay, so if he makes some changes on his local one and doesn't connect to the network before connecting into view, it'll take the one that's, in the central location.
I'd be interested if there is a way that the VPN requirement can be removed from the system, just from a end-user standpoint. Our users do not like connecting by VPN. They actually hate it. So we engineered our environment so that they don't necessarily need it. So something like this, for instance, does have value if you actually can remove that VPN requirement.
Okay, so you could probably look at maybe the Mirage technology to put in there. That could maybe help.
All
So
right.
I'd have to talk to you more in depth, but that could maybe help your solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Folder redirection, would you recommend a third share?
Sorry?
Folder redirection, the optional step.
Yes.
Would you recommend a third share to host this data?
Yeah, so that would be just standard Microsoft folder redirection, so they would need a share to put your data.
But not combined with the setting ones?
Not necessarily. I mean, you can still have your user folder and then have the subfolders in there as well for each of your components. You just have to make sure you get the paths all right and that sort of thing.
Correct.
But you could just have a user share, and then under that, have my documents, my pictures, my music, and then my user environment manager share.
Perfect.
So,
Yep.
Building back on the idea of, folks that have laptops in an office, then maybe go off, home, do some work from home, whatever. Are they going to get any kind of, if you've got a policy that says, when you open Word, map an H drive, when they get home, if they open Word, are they going to get some kind of an error saying I can't connect to an H drive because
No, it just won't connect.
it just won't connect?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, oh yeah, never mind, that's the same thing. Okay, cool,
Okay,
thanks.
no problem.
over here?
Sure. Two questions for RDS Edge environments. One, is there any reason I would want to use anything other than a mandatory profile whenever I've got this on top of it already for profile management? Windows profile.
Sorry, I didn't.
Why would I do anything other than a Windows mandatory profile under the hood versus a roaming profile? If I've already got roaming profiles in the environment, in a greenfields environment, would I be using a new? Why would I do anything other than a mandatory profile on top of this? Not making sense.
No.
All right, let me rephrase the question. I'll go cook that one. Hold on.
So how much effort actually goes into profiling an application?
Basically, you would have a machine with the UEM profile on there.
Mm-hmm.
You would start, right? It gives you an option to click an application. You click that, you choose your application, you launch your application, you make any changes you want to the application, you close it, you click stop, and it's done.
Okay, and then you just customize it via Notepad or any?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
it's literally 2 minutes.
I mean, if you don't have to do any customization, it literally is just launching the app and then closing it.
The other thing is, if you don't want any standard customization, and a user launches an application that isn't, then a user environment manager will see that and save those settings afterwards. Right? So you may have some applications that have a corporate standard managed from day one, and you may have some that the user just can change their settings as and when you please.
Excellent, thank you.
No problem.
I understand that this works on physical boxes as well as virtual machines. I've been unsuccessful on the Exchange floor in getting an answer as to whether there's any other method to license UEM other than buying a full Horizon Suite license.
I don't know.
I'm not a licensing
I seem to
guy.
be
Yeah, I don't know if I
unsuccessful
can
here,
answer
too.
that.
I'm a technical guy, I don't know licensing.
Okay.
Any other questions? I know we've got one person still trying to rewrite his. Any other questions?
So it can be both
Oh.
standalone.
Anyone else?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you very much. The usual surveys, please fill out your survey. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the feedback. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of the show.